The Galactic Empire's fleet descended upon Earth with overwhelming force. Massive ships, shining with sleek, metallic surfaces, hung in Earth's atmosphere, casting a shadow over cities below. The Emperor's voice echoed through the intergalactic communication channels, announcing their arrival with chilling certainty. Earth had been marked for annihilation, and there was no power in the universe capable of stopping their advanced forces. The Emperor, in his supreme arrogance, laughed at the notion of human resistance. He believed Earth's greatest defense was a joke, a relic of the past. The Empire's soldiers, clad in their state-of-the-art exoskeletons, wielding plasma rifles that could disintegrate anything in their path, landed on Earth with unrelenting force. The advanced alien technology was capable of withstanding anything humans could throw at them, or so they believed. Their energy shields were impenetrable to conventional weaponry, and their plasma-based arsenal could vaporize entire battalions in mere seconds. The sheer scale of their firepower was staggering, and Earth's military was woefully unprepared. Back on Earth, the sight of the alien fleet was like a grim prophecy come to life. Governments scrambled to act, but the truth was clear: their weapons were useless against the overwhelming might of the Empire. The best they could muster were old, outdated firearms, some of them decades old, rifles, handguns, grenades. They had no chance of standing up to energy shields, plasma beams, and technological superiority. The few remaining military units scattered across the globe made futile attempts to resist the Empire's arrival, their efforts ending in nothing more than explosions of futile defiance. Amid the chaos, Captain Victor Hayes stood in front of his ragtag unit. He had seen his fair share of wars and had fought with weapons from a bygone era. Now, in the face of an enemy that mocked humanity's capability, Victor stood as a pillar of resolve. He had fought wars when old weapons still mattered, when skill, training, and determination could carry a soldier farther than any technology could. He wasn't naive; he knew the odds were stacked against them. But he had also witnessed humanity's greatest strengths: ingenuity, persistence, and most of all, the refusal to yield in the face of impossible odds. Victor had spent the last several years instructing new recruits on military tactics and survival. Now, he was being asked to lead a resistance, not with the modern tools of war, but with those same old, seemingly obsolete weapons that had once been so effective in their time. The heavy machine guns, the rifles, the hand grenades, technologies that were considered antiquated and inefficient by the Empire. Yet in Victor's mind those weapons still held the power to win battles. Not because of their firepower, but because of the resourcefulness they represented. He gathered his team, a mix of seasoned soldiers, veterans who had long left the field of combat, and fresh recruits eager for the chance to make a stand. The group was small, but Victor's leadership had inspired them. They weren't just a military unit, they were humanity's last hope, the final bastion of defense in the wake of an unstoppable enemy. As the Empire's forces landed, spreading terror across Earth's major cities, Victor and his team were tasked with holding the line at Ridgeview, a small but strategic military camp situated in the hills. In the command center, Victor huddled with his officers, strategizing. Their enemy was large, technologically advanced, and absolutely merciless. But they were far from helpless. "We have to hold them off long enough for reinforcements to arrive. If we can buy the government time, they can rally more troops, get more firepower in place," Victor explained. But even as he spoke, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. The Empire's shields were designed to repel nearly any kind of weapon Earth could produce. The Empire's weapons were designed for total destruction. "How long do we have?" one of his officers asked. Victor's eyes narrowed. "We don't have much time. We have to make it count." The plan was simple: dig in, stay hidden, and use guerrilla tactics. They would be no match for the Empire's strength in a full-on battle. They had to be smarter. They would need to outlast their invaders, using their knowledge of the terrain, setting traps, and making their weaponry seem more formidable than it truly was. They would harass the Empire's forces, slow their advance, and buy the Earth's leadership enough time to figure out a strategy. But as they set up camp, something strange happened. The Empire, with all its technology, still underestimated the resilience of humanity. General Zornak, the leader of the invasion, issued his first public message, a broadcast that swept across the world. His voice, cold and calculated, echoed across Earth's radios and televisions. I, General Zornak of the Galactic Empire, have come to deliver the final judgment on your planet. Your puny defenses, your pathetic attempts at resistance, will amount to nothing. I offer you one chance: surrender, and I will grant you mercy. Otherwise, we will burn your world to the ground. The screen blinked off, replaced by static. The message was clear. The Empire had no respect for Earth. They believed their advanced weaponry would crush humanity's defenses effortlessly. They thought the humans' reliance on outdated technologies was laughable. Victor stood in silence, listening to the broadcast. His mind raced. What were they supposed to do? The enemy was laughing at them. Their weapons had been deemed ineffective before the fight had even begun. But there was something Zornak hadn't considered. Earth's old weaponry, while considered primitive in comparison to plasma-based rifles and energy shields, still carried with it an edge. The relentless nature of human ingenuity. The knowledge passed down through generations. The old, unpolished tools of war, used by men and women who had never given up, even when the odds were impossibly stacked against them. Victor knew what they had to do. They had to give the Empire a lesson they would never forget. It wouldn't be with new tech or weapons, it would be with the unexpected. Humanity had always survived through creativity, through thinking outside the box, through adapting when everyone else thought the game was over. And now, humanity's survival depended on it. The first clash would be brutal, but Victor had something in mind. Something the Empire would never expect, something hidden away from the world's gaze for decades. The old guard would rise again, and the fight for Earth's survival would begin. The battle began with the first wave of the Empire's forces landing just outside Ridgeview. Massive dropships descended from the sky, their engines roaring as they kicked up clouds of dust and debris. On the ground, the Empire's soldiers disembarked, their exoskeletons glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. They were imposing, their suits built for combat in any environment, their plasma rifles crackling with the promise of destruction. The soldiers were an advanced breed, highly trained and equipped with technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. The humans stood no chance, or so the invaders believed. Victor and his team watched from their concealed positions. Their weapons were primitive compared to the plasma weapons the Empire wielded, but they weren't about to back down without a fight. The humans took cover in the surrounding trees and bunkers, their old rifles and explosives at the ready. They had no illusions about their chances of winning in a head-on clash, but their plan was never to fight with brute force. They would use guerrilla tactics, hit and run, attack when the Empire least expected it, and retreat before they could be overwhelmed. The first shots rang out as the humans engaged the advancing Empire soldiers. The sound of gunfire was almost drowned out by the Empire's plasma blasts, which erupted in violent explosions, tearing into the ground and vaporizing anything in their path. The humans responded with small arms fire, their bullets tearing through the air, but each shot seemed useless against the Empire's shields. The soldiers, protected by their advanced technology, continued their march forward, unbothered by the few stray shots that found their marks. Victor's squad moved through the woods, relying on speed and the element of surprise. Their goal wasn't to defeat the invaders in direct combat, it was to harass them, to weaken their morale, and to buy time. They set up ambushes, waiting for the perfect moments to strike. As an Empire soldier wandered too far from the main group, one of Victor's men, a sharpshooter named Dixon, took aim and fired, sending a bullet into the soldier's side. The Empire soldier crumpled to the ground, but not before his suit emitted a sharp warning sound, alerting the others to his downfall. The squad quickly retreated into the trees, disappearing like ghosts. The Empire's soldiers began to realize they were not just facing a weak, uncoordinated force, they were fighting a determined enemy. But still, their shields were impenetrable, and their advanced plasma guns tore through the forest with ease. Humanity's resistance seemed futile in the face of such overwhelming power. Victor knew that the resistance couldn't last long against these odds. They needed something more, something unexpected. As the day wore on, The Empire's forces began to push forward, their exoskeletons stomping through the forest. The humans had inflicted a few casualties, but at the cost of exposing their positions. Victor's team was running out of time. They had to find a way to turn the tide. Then Victor had an idea. A plan so crazy it just might work. As they retreated to a hidden bunker for the night, he gathered his team around. "We're not going to beat them with firepower," he said, his voice steady despite the growing pressure. "But we can exploit their weaknesses." One of his officers, Lieutenant Mitchell, raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, sir?" Victor gestured to the back of the bunker, where an old relic was stored. It had been collecting dust for decades, but it was still a potent force, a heavy machine gun, a relic of humanity's past. The Empire had dismissed human weaponry as outdated, so much so that they didn't even bother to scout out the old bunkers and military storage facilities. "This is our ace in the hole," Victor said. "They think our weapons are useless, but they don't know about this." The machine gun was a formidable weapon, capable of firing thousands of rounds in a single minute. The firepower alone would be enough to tear apart the Empire's soldiers. The only problem was the shield. Their plasma-based energy shields would easily deflect any traditional bullet. But Victor had noticed something during their earlier skirmishes. The Empire's shields had a weakness, something that hadn't been apparent at first glance. They were designed to stop energy-based weapons, not kinetic force. The shields absorbed the impact of plasma shots, but they didn't account for the blunt force of a solid, high-velocity bullet. "We're going to hit them where it hurts," Victor said, his eyes gleaming with determination. "The machine gun's rounds will penetrate their shields. We'll use it as a last line of defense, and we'll make them regret underestimating us." The plan was risky. The machine gun hadn't been fired in years, and they had no idea how the Empire would respond to it. But they had no other choice. The clock was ticking, and the Empire was closing in. The next day, as the Empire's soldiers advanced deeper into Ridgeview, Victor's team took their positions once more. This time, however, they didn't retreat. They didn't run. They waited, biding their time. The machine gun sat hidden behind a mound of dirt, its barrel gleaming in the morning sun. It was their final hope. As the first wave of Empire soldiers entered the kill zone, Victor gave the signal. The machine gun roared to life, its deafening noise breaking the silence of the forest. The bullets tore through the air, slamming into the Empire's energy shields with a force the invaders hadn't prepared for. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The shields absorbed the impact, just as they had with every other weapon. But then, something changed. The shields flickered, and the first soldier in the front line collapsed to the ground, his suit torn apart by the relentless barrage of bullets. Victor watched in disbelief as the machine gun continued to fire, its rounds cutting through the Empire's forces like a hot knife through butter. The energy shields, powerful as they were, couldn't withstand the sheer force of the bullets. The machine gun's impact overwhelmed the shield's defenses, leaving the soldiers vulnerable to the relentless barrage. The Empire's soldiers fell one by one, their once impenetrable defenses now nothing more than a weakness exposed by human ingenuity. The Empire's troops quickly realized they were in trouble. General Zornak, the leader of the invasion, ordered his forces to fall back and reassess. They had underestimated the human weaponry, thinking it was outdated and ineffective. But now, it was clear that humanity's old tools were more than just relics of the past. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the Empire retreated to regroup, Victor's team exchanged glances, their hearts pounding with the realization that they had just turned the tide of the battle. The machine gun, an old weapon thought to be useless, had struck a devastating blow to the Empire's superiority. Humanity's resistance was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Victor's plan had worked. The humans had exploited the Empire's flaw, using their own outdated technology against them. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the invasion began, the Empire was no longer certain of victory. The humans had shown them that there was more to a fight than just technology. There was heart, there was ingenuity, and most of all, there was the will to survive. The Empire's retreat came swiftly, but it was not without frustration. General Zornak's forces had taken heavy casualties, more than they ever expected. Their advanced technology, which they had so confidently believed would annihilate humanity, had faltered in the face of something as primitive as a heavy machine gun. The invaders, having grown accustomed to the dominance of their shields and plasma weapons, were caught off guard by the power of kinetic force. It was a devastating realization for the Empire, one that shook their confidence to the core. As Zornak pulled his forces back to regroup, the humans did not waste a moment. They knew the Empire would not stay down for long. The retreat was temporary, a chance for the invaders to reassess their strategy. But humanity had gained a critical advantage. The machine gun, thought to be outdated and ineffective, had just become a symbol of their resilience. It was a weapon from a bygone era, but it had revealed a weakness in the Empire's armor that no one had expected. Victor, standing at the front of his unit, allowed himself a rare moment of quiet pride. They had done it. They had fought back. The humans had shown the Empire that there was more to warfare than just advanced technology. Their creativity, their tenacity, and their refusal to yield had been enough to exploit the Empire's oversight. But Victor knew the battle was far from over. The Empire would not simply abandon their plans. They would return, stronger and more determined to crush humanity once and for all. As the night settled over Ridgeview, the soldiers regrouped. The earlier battle had been won, but the cost had been high. Some of the men and women were injured, others were still processing the shock of what had just occurred. The machine gun had proven effective, but it had also drawn attention. The Empire would likely change their approach, making it harder to use the weapon again. Victor gathered his team and began to plan the next phase of their resistance. "We have to be ready for their next move," he said, his voice steady. "They'll learn from their mistakes, and we need to be prepared." One of his lieutenants, Sergeant Green, nodded grimly. "What do we do now, sir? We've proven we can hurt them, but they're not going to make the same mistake again." Victor's mind raced as he considered their options. The Empire's shields would undoubtedly be upgraded to handle the unexpected assault from the machine gun. They would likely deploy more sophisticated countermeasures. The humans' advantage had been the element of surprise, and while they had won this round, they couldn't rely on that success alone. The old machine gun was a powerful weapon, but it was not a magic bullet. It was a tool, one that could turn the tide, but only if they could keep the pressure on. "We need to keep hitting them where it hurts," Victor said, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. "We'll need to find new ways to disrupt their tactics. Guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and anything else we can throw at them. But we also need to be smart about it. If we're not careful, they'll adapt quickly." The team spent hours brainstorming, mapping out potential targets and formulating plans for sabotage and further attacks. Victor knew the key to their survival would be staying unpredictable, using the terrain to their advantage, and never giving the Empire the chance to regroup. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder how long they could keep up the fight. The Empire was a relentless force, and humanity's resources were limited. They couldn't afford to make many mistakes. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, General Zornak was not idle. His confidence had been shattered, but he was not a fool. He knew the Empire's technological superiority could not be doubted. The loss of a few soldiers, while significant, was not enough to defeat his forces. They had suffered a setback, but Zornak would not allow himself to be outmaneuvered by a few primitive weapons. His mind raced as he considered how to counter the human resistance. His engineers worked tirelessly to modify the Empire's shields, reinforcing them against the kinetic force that had pierced through them before. The new shields would be tougher, more resistant to bullets, and capable of withstanding the kind of sustained fire the humans had used against them. Zornak also ordered his forces to deploy more advanced weapons, plasma rifles with adaptive targeting systems that could lock onto human positions faster than ever before. "We will crush them," Zornak muttered to himself. "These humans will learn that their old tricks will not save them." The Empire's strategy would shift. The next battle would be more intense, more dangerous, and Victor knew they couldn't afford to wait for the Empire to come to them. They had to strike first. He briefed his team, and this time, they were not simply preparing for defense. They would go on the offensive, striking at the Empire's weak points before they could regroup. The next day, as the Empire prepared for its counterattack, Victor's team launched their next move. The Empire's forces had moved to establish a forward base, thinking that they had secured the area. But Victor knew better. He had studied the terrain, scouted the area, and found several vulnerable locations. They weren't fighting a conventional war anymore. They were fighting for survival. As the humans moved in under the cover of darkness, their stealth tactics allowed them to infiltrate the Empire's perimeter. They sabotaged the Empire's communication systems, severing their link to the main fleet. They targeted fuel supplies, destroying vehicles and equipment that would take days to replace. It wasn't much, but it was enough to slow the Empire's advance and give the humans a brief window of opportunity. The Empire's response was swift. They had been caught off guard, and their soldiers scrambled to repair the damage. The battle quickly escalated as the two sides clashed once more. This time, however, the Empire's forces were more prepared. Their shields had been upgraded, and their plasma weapons were deadlier than ever. But the humans were not deterred. They fought back with everything they had: old rifles, homemade explosives, and a tenacity that the Empire had never seen before. As the battle raged on, the humans continued to make gains. Their tactics were unconventional, unpredictable. They attacked from multiple directions, using the terrain to their advantage and striking at the Empire's blind spots. Victor's team fought with everything they had, pushing the Empire's forces back, step by step. The Empire, despite their technological superiority, had underestimated humanity once again. The humans had learned from their earlier success, and now they were showing the Empire just how dangerous they could be. Victor watched as his team fought valiantly, his heart swelling with pride. They were outgunned, outmatched, and yet they had managed to push the Empire to the brink. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, it felt as though humanity had a chance. The Empire was not invincible. It could be beaten. But as the tide of the battle began to shift in humanity's favor, Victor knew that the Empire would not give up easily. The war was just beginning, and the next confrontation would be even more brutal than the last. The question was no longer whether humanity could survive, it was whether they could keep the fight going long enough to win. The Empire would return with new tactics, new weapons, and the full weight of their technological might. But Victor was ready. Humanity would not go down without a fight. Not this time. The final confrontation arrived sooner than anyone had expected. General Zornak's forces, having regrouped and reinforced their technology, returned with overwhelming strength. Their shields had been upgraded to withstand the unexpected force of human weaponry, and their plasma rifles were now optimized to eliminate any threats with deadly precision. This time, the Empire came with full force, and humanity's resistance was about to face its most perilous trial yet. Victor's team had been preparing for this day. They knew the Empire would retaliate, and they had no illusions about their chances. The fight had been hard, but they had already pushed the invaders back once. Now, the plan was simple: hold the line for as long as possible. They would use the same guerrilla tactics that had served them so well before: hit and run, sabotage, and above all, never let the Empire establish control. But there was no denying the gravity of the situation. The Empire was bringing everything to bear, and humanity's forces were dwindling. Victor stood at the front of his team, a weathered look on his face. The weight of the responsibility was immense, but he had never faltered. He knew what was at stake. This was it. Earth's fate rested in their hands, and for all their ingenuity, for all their resourcefulness, they were still the underdogs in this fight. The Empire was larger, more powerful, and far better equipped. But Victor had learned one undeniable truth: the Empire had underestimated humanity from the very beginning. As the Empire's forces began to advance, the sound of their ships and soldiers flooded the battlefield. The air crackled with energy as plasma beams lit up the sky, their blue-white light cutting through the darkened landscape. The humans, positioned in their hidden strongholds, watched as the enemy approached. It was a terrifying sight, but they were prepared. They had fought this enemy before, and they knew the Empire's weaknesses. The first wave of invaders struck hard, with exoskeletons reinforced and their plasma rifles blazing. It was a sight to behold. The Empire's soldiers moved with deadly precision, their advanced technology turning the battlefield into a nightmare of destruction. But the humans were ready. They struck with speed and agility, using the terrain to their advantage. Old rifles, improvised explosives, and the heavy machine gun, their most powerful weapon, came into play once again. It was a desperate attempt to hold off the tide, but it was all they had. The battle raged on, with the humans managing to inflict casualties despite the overwhelming power of the Empire. The machine gun, still proving its worth, tore through the Empire's soldiers, exploiting the weakness in their energy shields once more. However, the Empire had learned from their earlier mistakes, and their forces quickly adapted. New countermeasures were deployed, shields stronger than ever, designed to absorb the full force of kinetic impact. The humans' earlier success with the machine gun was no longer enough. The Empire's technology had evolved, and their weapons were now more effective than ever. Victor watched as his soldiers fell back, retreating into the cover of nearby hills and forests. The Empire was relentless, and the tide of battle was beginning to shift in their favor. The human resistance was weakening, their numbers thinning with each passing minute. The machine gun continued to fire, but the Empire's forces were now better protected. The humans were outgunned, and the odds seemed insurmountable. In the chaos, Victor's mind raced. He had to think of something, some way to turn the tide. The Empire's forces were advancing, their shields were stronger, and their soldiers more determined than ever. But there was one thing the Empire had overlooked, one thing they hadn't counted on. Humanity's ingenuity had always been their greatest weapon. It was what had allowed them to survive, what had allowed them to resist time and time again. And now, in the face of insurmountable odds, it was time to use it again. Victor gathered his officers and quickly devised a new plan. The Empire's new shield technology had made it harder for the humans to do any significant damage, but it wasn't impenetrable. If they could find a way to disrupt the Empire's communications, if they could disable the systems that coordinated the Empire's forces, they might have a chance. It was a long shot, but at this point, they had no other option. The team set to work quickly. Sabotage, stealth, and misdirection would be their best tools. As the Empire's forces advanced, Victor's team moved behind enemy lines, using the chaos of the battle to mask their movements. They infiltrated the Empire's communication hubs, disabling their equipment, causing confusion and disarray among the invaders. It was a small victory, but it bought the humans some precious time. The Empire's coordination was faltering, and for the first time, the humans had a glimmer of hope. But the Empire wasn't going to give up so easily. General Zornak, furious at the disruption of his forces, ordered a full-scale assault on the humans' position. The Empire's soldiers pressed forward with renewed fury, their plasma rifles now more deadly than ever. The air was filled with the sound of explosions as the Empire advanced. It seemed that the humans' fight was almost over. However, in the midst of the chaos, a breakthrough came. One of Victor's lieutenants, Sergeant Green, had managed to infiltrate the Empire's main command center. Using the confusion caused by their sabotage efforts, Green accessed the Empire's main control systems. It was a risky move, but it worked. He initiated a system-wide shutdown of the Empire's communications, causing their forces to fall into disarray. The Empire's soldiers, now cut off from their command structure, were suddenly vulnerable. Victor saw the opening and seized it. "Now!" he shouted. The remaining human forces surged forward, attacking the Empire's soldiers with everything they had. The machine gun roared to life once again, tearing through the Empire's ranks. The humans, now on the offensive, used the chaos to their advantage. The Empire's forces, without their coordination, faltered. The human soldiers pushed forward with renewed energy, determined to turn the tide once and for all. The battle was fierce, but the humans were no longer fighting defensively. They were fighting for survival, for their very existence. The Empire's soldiers, though technologically superior, could not withstand the human onslaught. One by one, the invaders fell. The tide of battle began to shift in humanity's favor. As the last of the Empire's forces were pushed back, General Zornak stood on the edge of the battlefield, watching in disbelief as his forces retreated. It was a crushing defeat. The Empire, for all its technological might, had been defeated by the resilience and ingenuity of humanity. Zornak's pride had been shattered, and the Empire was left to lick its wounds, defeated by the very people they had once considered inferior. Victor, standing at the head of his team, felt a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had fought back and won. It wasn't just the power of their weapons that had won the day, it was their spirit, their determination, and their refusal to give up. The Empire had underestimated them, and now, they would never forget the lesson. Humanity was not to be trifled with. As the last remnants of the Empire's forces fled, Victor looked out across the battlefield, knowing that this victory was just the beginning. Earth had been saved, but the war was not over. There would be other battles, other challenges. But for now, humanity had proven something that no one would ever forget, that no matter the odds, no matter the enemy, humanity's greatest strength was not in their technology, but in their heart.